if I told you that the way that labor and birth is depicted in movies, the terrifying water breaking, everything going super fast, it being an emergency, and you screaming and plopping blood vessels and all of this stuff was actually an inaccurate representation for like most births, would you believe me? Let's get into my 8 ways to dispel fear going into labor. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a childbirth educator, a doula, and a mama of 2, and I am passionate about helping other parents give birth fearlessly. So let's get into this. Fear around birth can be a big thing that we women hold on to. There's been so many terrible depictions of what labor and birth looks like in the media and in Hollywood and all of this stuff. Often they depict it as something that is super fast-paced, super emergency-esque, and something completely out of our control. You also often hear stories about women having these terrible birth experiences where X, Y, and Z went wrong and their plan A, B, and C did not happen. And so this can become a burden on women who are just finding out for the very first time that they are pregnant, especially when it comes to their labor experience and expectations. So today I want to help you dispel your fears around labor and childbirth. So on the screen right now, I'm showing a list of common fears of first-time moms. So the first step to dispelling fear around labor and childbirth is to acknowledge that the fear exists. Acknowledge within yourself that this is a fear that you have, and just don't deny it. So once you've taken the first step and you've acknowledged that you have fears around childbirth, you can move on to step number 2, which is to pinpoint which fears you have. So again, I'm showing you this list of different fears that different women say that they have going into their first baby or even subsequent babies. And it's really important, once you've acknowledged, okay, yes, I have some fears around childbirth, to then go into say, okay, what are those fears? What am I afraid of? Am I afraid of tearing? Am I afraid of a C-section? Am I afraid of an epidural not working? Whatever you are afraid of, pinpoint it. Once you've pinpointed it, you can get more specific, which is number 3. So when it comes to tearing, why are you afraid of tearing? Are you afraid that it's going to hurt? Are you afraid about having intimacy with your partner postpartum if you tear? Are you afraid of what it actually feels like to tear in birth? Get specific on why you are afraid of that thing. So don't just say, oh, I'm scared of tearing. I don't want to tear from one hole to the next. Say like, I'm scared of tearing or needing an episiotomy because of the way that my body is tearing. Whatever it may be, get specific. Then after you get specific, tip number 4 or step number 4 is to get them out of your head. Once you have thought about, okay, this is my specific fear, write them down and tell them to your partner or your care provider. Especially if you have a doula, this is a great thing to bring to them and be able to say, hey, doula, or hey, partner, I am scared about tearing. I'm really nervous about having to go through a potential C-section. The reason for this step, the reason to get them out of your head, is when we speak them, all of a sudden they seem a little bit lighter. We put them out of our brains and into the light in front of us, and they can no longer hold on to us in our heads. Then once you've spoken them to your partner, your care provider, or your doula, find out the risk. If that's a little too overwhelming for you, ask your doula to do some research, or ask your partner to do some research, or ask your care provider to do some research on what your risk is, depending on if you're a low or high risk woman in a pregnancy. So for example, if you are in a a low-risk pregnancy and everything is going well, and you are planning on having a water birth out of the hospital, your risk for tearing is actually less just because of the nature of having a baby in the water. So these are things to look into. When you actually know the risk, you're better able to really work through your brain and say, okay, I am scared of having a C-section. Here in Canada, you have to have good reason for a C-section. You can't just opt into one. Usually it's out of an emergency situation, right? So then you realize, okay, my risk is this percentage, or maybe you're trying for a VBAC and you're worried about uterine rupture. It's good to know the numbers and try and understand, okay, what is my risk actually? Instead of our brains being like, my risk is 100%. If I push a baby out, I am going to tear. Like that's not the truth. So it's good to look at the risk based on your desired form of birth and where you plan on giving birth. Then once you know the risk, step number 6 is to plan. If you are really, really worried about having any tearing or an episiotomy, it is a really good idea to have plans around what you can do to lower your risk. So things like not pushing on your back, things like not getting an epidural so that your body is more control and you can feel your body bearing down and you're not pushing on demand, you're pushing with your body. Things like having a water birth or even having your partner do something called perineal massage. These are all great ways to lower your risk of tearing. When you're able to put a plan in place, you're able to feel empowered and work through those fears and say, okay, if this fear comes up in labor, I have made a plan for it. Then number 7 is once you've made a plan, don't let it hold power over you. If you have voiced, okay, I'm afraid of tearing, and you've talked to your care provider and you've said, I recognize that my risk of tearing goes down if I push without an epidural. So I would really like to try and have an unmedicated birth to lower my risk of tearing. Then you have to let it go and try super hard to not let it hold power over you. So when that fear creeps back up and you say in your brain and it says, oh, I'm gonna tear, you can say, you know what? Thank you, brain, for wanting to protect me. I have already put a plan into place that is hopefully going to help reduce my risk, and I can go forward ready to take on labor and birth. And then number 8 is set yourself up for success. The reason that I'm called Fearless Birthing Doula is because I think it is so pivotal and vital to having a fearless birth, which is to work through your fears. Figure out your mindset. And the best way to set yourself up for success is to follow those last 7 steps that I just gave you, but to also really verbalize your fears to the people that you love who are going to be in the birth space with you. So if you decide to hire a doula, which I highly recommend if you've got some of those bigger fears, make sure you speak to them. Often a doula is able to talk you through contractions, help remind you of what plans you've put into place, and really able to just guide you through labor, be there coaching you to have the birth that you are wanting to have. Another great way to set yourself up for success is do some mindset work. So alongside dispelling your fears, work through your insecurities in pregnancy, because all of those things will most likely come up in your labor experience. Labor is intense, birth is intense, and it can be hard for some people. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is to dispel your fears. Doing these 8 things can be a great help when it comes to prepping your mind for labor and the birth of your baby. I hope that you liked this short video today. If you did, make sure to subscribe and hit that little notification bell so you get informed of any time I put out new content, which is every Wednesday. Make sure to give me a thumbs up and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.